7 years after. Article 370. What is left of Kashmir's right to choose? Today marks 7 years since the Indian government effectively abolished the special constitutional status of Jammu and Kashmir. Under a decision taken on August 5, 2019, the region was stripped of its statehood and reorganized into 2 separate union territories, Jammu and Kashmir, now directly administered by the federal government, and Ladakh. That decision opened a new era of tightened political control over a region whose population remains majority Muslim. But how did we get here? Kashmir. Kashmir sits in the north of the Indian subcontinent, in a strategic position between India, Pakistan, and China. When British colonial rule ended and India was partitioned in 1947, the princely states were asked to choose between joining India or Pakistan. Although the overwhelming majority of Jammu and Kashmir's population was Muslim, its ruler, Maharaja Hari Singh, was Hindu. He initially tried to delay a decision, then asserted that sovereignty over Kashmir belonged to him alone and rejected the people's right to choose Pakistan. On October 26, 1947, he signed the Instrument of Accession, bringing Kashmir under Indian rule. Volunteer mujahideen and tribal forces from Pakistan entered Kashmir in response. Hari Singh appealed to India for military assistance. India accepted the Instrument of Accession and dispatched troops, triggering the First India-Pakistan War over Kashmir. The dispute reached the United Nations Security Council. Resolution 47 of 1948 called for the restoration of security and, ultimately, a plebiscite to determine the Kashmiri people's future. The preconditions, above all disarmament and troop withdrawal, were never met. Kashmir has remained divided ever since. The Indian-administered region, Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan under Pakistan, and Aksai Chin under China. What Article 370 guaranteed? Article 370, repealed 7 years ago, had regulated the special relationship between Jammu and Kashmir and the Indian federal government. Beyond limited domains such as defense, foreign affairs, and communications, the state retained its own constitution, its own flag, and extensive legislative powers, giving it a degree of autonomy unmatched by any other Indian state. A linked provision, Article 35A, empowered the local administration to define who qualified as a permanent resident. It governed land ownership, public appointments, and access to social rights, effectively reserving Kashmir's demographic composition and economic resources for its own population. That autonomy had already been worn down for decades by growing intervention from New Delhi, but its legal existence endured until 2019. August 5, 2019, the rupture. On August 5th, the Union of India issued a presidential order altering how the Constitution applied to Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Parliament simultaneously rendered Article 370 void, abolished the state's status, and split the territory into 2 union territories. In December 2023, India's Supreme Court declared the move lawful, endorsing the claim that Article 370 had always been temporary. However, the political, demographic, and human rights consequences of this move lingers. Life under occupation. Kashmir has long carried one of the heaviest military presences on Earth. After August 5th, that siege intensified further. Just before the announcement, the government cut the internet entirely. Access returned only in stages, and severe speed restrictions persisted for years afterwards. Strict controls on communication and pervasive security measures continue to shape daily life in the region. Politicians, activists, lawyers, and public intellectuals have been detained en masse. Former chief ministers and other senior political figures have been jailed or held under house arrest for months, some transferred to prisons far outside Kashmir. Human rights organizations report that many detainees have been denied contact with family and legal counsel for extended periods. The local press has suffered severely. Internet blackouts, security restrictions, and administrative pressure have made independent reporting and the free flow of information increasingly difficult to sustain. Engineering a demographic shift. Among the most alarming consequences of repealing Articles 370 and 35A is the risk to Kashmir's demographic character. New federal rules have opened the region to outside settlement, property acquisition and investment on a scale never before permitted. Kashmiris have warned that, over time, the Muslim majority could be eroded, the indigenous population reduced to a minority in its own homeland, and competition over land and resources sharpened. This whole scenario cannot be separated from the broader rise of Hindu nationalism in India. The Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, has for years cast Article 370 as an obstacle to national integration and made its repeal a central political pledge, one now fulfilled. International law. Indefinitely deferred. Kashmir remains one of the unresolved disputes on the UN Security Council's agenda. Resolution 47 called for a plebiscite once security was restored. It was never held. India has for decades refused international mediation, insisting Kashmir is a bilateral matter between itself and Pakistan. Pakistan maintains that the dispute is international in character and that Kashmiris possess the right to self-determination. UN human rights mechanisms and international organizations have repeatedly raised concerns over freedom of expression, assembly, communication, fair trial guarantees, and arbitrary detention in the region. None of these warnings has produced any binding consequence capable of changing conditions on the ground. Conclusion. 7 years after the revocation of Jammu and Kashmir's special status, the issue at its core is the steady erosion of the Kashmiri people's right to determine their own political future, identity, land, and destiny. Sustained military occupation, communication blackouts, mass arrests, press suppression, and the deliberate reshaping of demographics are the everyday face of that erosion. That Kashmir remains unresolved after nearly 8 decades is proof that international resolutions alone cannot deliver justice. Without enforcement of UN resolutions, without human rights findings backed by concrete mechanisms, and without placing the will of the Kashmiri people at the center of any settlement, a lasting peace will remain out of reach. The Islamic world's concern for Kashmir cannot be confined to statements issued in moments of crisis. Alongside political and diplomatic engagement, it must include documenting human rights violations, supporting Kashmiri journalists and researchers, keeping the issue alive in academic and legal forums, and ensuring that the voices of Kashmiris themselves reach the international public. This is not a task for occasional solidarity. It demands sustained, deliberate, and institutionalized commitment. Kashmir is not a piece of land expected to be shared between India and Pakistan. It is the homeland of a people with their own will, identity, and future. Therefore, a just solution will only be possible by ensuring that the people of Kashmir are free to have a say in their own future, rather than being forced to accept a future dictated from outside. The final say on Kashmir's destiny must rest with the people of Kashmir themselves.